Yeah, I would say that you have to be very aggressive here into the future. And I think that this decoupling of energy use and economic development has to be much more underlined. So if we take the United States, that increased its economic output with 62% during the last 20 years, and at the same time only increased energy use by 20%. That's quite a big change. And if China, for example, could immediately move into a much more decoupling of not having the same relationship between energy and economic development, I think that would spin off a lot of things. And which are then those industries that will have to make this thing happen? It's ICT, high-tech technology. It's all those sectors that can actually increase the economic productivity, but also the energy efficiency. So these things will be very crucial into the future, and I think also that the Chinese that's what they are playing on, that they are pledging this, that they will make themselves more efficient. They don't want to cap, but they want to be more and more efficient, and I think that has to be driven. Now, how is the absorption capacity of all this? This is a big problem, and when we are looking to the building sector. We have 800 million owners of buildings on this planet. How do we make them to invest? How do we make them to actually put up money, 30,000 euros for fixing their house? So that's a big, really challenge. And here we don't, as I will come back to, we don't think that the market will stimulate that. It has to be by codes, by rules. And perhaps that we have to, in the future, equalize energy with health and safety. So energy, health and safety, we never discuss this. Health and safety security, it can cost as much as we need, because we need to have that. But energy use, we put aside. But in the future, perhaps, energy use, energy efficiency, will be at the same level, that we will have the same type of audit, same type of rules, and buildings will not be allowed to perform in a certain way. That might start to drive another type of thinking in the whole sector.
Svante, if you then represent the entrepreneur who is one of those going to provide the new technologies and solutions to get us into the more sustainable and climate positive world, what would your expectations and hopes be for the different kind of stakeholders which you are turning to in terms of capital requirements, getting capital for your firm? If you think about the private investor, the larger companies, the public funds, what would you like to see if we get into this agreement for you?
Well, I'd like to see, as I said, different business models, because as we heard right now, there were 800 million business owners. They have a decision. They maybe not have the money right now to do the investments, but if we have 160 billion and you can invest in technology that actually has a payback time, then it should be able to guarantee them, probably based on the size of their building, a certain amount of loans with a very low interest rate. Then they could take that money, invest it in new technology, pay back the loan after a few years. We get the good equipment in because it's still financially viable, and you take a smaller risk than if you would go to the bank. Or otherwise you could also have the banks actually do the calculations for you. Then we avoid some part of the bottleneck that government agencies has to distribute the money. Instead of maybe 1,000 decision makers, we get 800 million decision makers that make their own private investment decision based on their own situation and their own financial. That's, as I said, new business models, because I think we need to get the technology out faster. And I think that if you look at some of the projects that are going on, we see a lot of early adopters. People are filling their entire roofs with solar panels. The payback time is 40 years, so it's terrible from a financial perspective, but there is a will to do something. So if we help them do this kind of things, maybe through different types of funding or financing, or actually just lending them the money for this particular reason, then I think that would probably benefit your situation as well, because then you have more business going on for the ones you invest in. Right?
Any further comments from the panels or issues you want to raise, or should we ask if there are questions from the audience? Anyone here have any question for the panel, please?
Hello. My name is Ted. I'm from Cortus AB. I'd just like to ask the REHAC gentleman there. Let's say I'm an entrepreneur and now I'm writing a business plan, meaning I have no investment yet. And I would like to incorporate into my business plan the financing model through the carbon crediting system, whatever that comes out of Copenhagen. And I know that I'm inexperienced and I have no idea how to calculate it. And I can't hire a consultant to do it. So what do you normally do in these circumstances? I mean, usually I will be experienced in finance or something, but this thing is so new to everybody, and who actually has background experience in doing this? I would probably go Google how much a ton of carbon is worth and multiply it, but that's probably a totally wrong figure, right?
Yeah. Well, if you ask me, I would only include it as a large part of the background scenario, that this is a large structural change going on. This money might come, it might not come, it might take 2 years, it might take 5 years. So you can't base any calculations on it, but you can add it to the background section of the business plan just to give information about what's going on in the future and that it might be positive for you.
So right now you're saying that I can't convince an investor to show that I have more value because I'm a clean technology and I'm saving him more money through carbon credits. And wouldn't that be the whole point of this crediting system?
Well, I think if you base your business prospect on that in the future carbon credits will make my company profitable, then you have a problem. Because you have to find some way of making the company profitable, or at least on a level basis within the near future. If the carbon credits come on, then you have a bonus, which will make your company even more profitable. But since it's so long term, I don't think an investor would, even if you put it down to numbers, I think they would discount it immediately. But maybe.
I agree.
But,
yeah. I agree. I agree also.
Any more questions from the audience, please? Can we have a microphone down?
Thank you. My name is Lina Green, and I wanted to ask 2 quick questions, actually. One with respect to the huge amounts of money that are going out into the arena. You talk about $160 billion. What are your thoughts about maybe the role that governments can play, aside from the regulatory part that you talked about, is to be, governments are the biggest procurers themselves. And so if they could make green or clean tech a vendor selection criteria, what are your thoughts on that? The second quick question I wanted to ask was, in many countries I have seen when governments come in with good intentions, with a lot of money, they end up choosing the wrong, what they think are winners, but they end up stifling innovation and a lot of good companies. How do you think we can avoid this?
Igor, please.
If I may start. Regarding your first question on the procurement issue, as I referred to earlier, we in the European Union, the member states have set an indicative target, let's say 50% of green public procurement in their public procurement procedures. And many member states are actually close to 50% or even above. Sweden is one, and UK are, for example, one of the countries above 50% of public procurement already being green. This is, of course, not a binding target, but rather something member states move towards. With a new communication on GPP, this is the talks may continue, making this maybe legally binding for the member states. Regarding the second issue, some of my, let's say, my experiences that I use what's being done at the community level again. What I think is very much the role of the government or the institutions would be to decrease the risk. We're not investors. We don't have that same kind of market expertise as professional venture capitalists do, for example. Knowing this is why we should use the funds to for example, we now act through the European Investment Fund, one of the EU bodies, to where we give the venture capital funds that invest in green tech a premium. If we add up, I think, up to 40% to their subscribed capital of public funds so that, let's say, to leverage their funding, but also to decrease the risk of investment for them. So I think what's more and more is acting through the market intermediaries rather than the government picking and choosing winners, let's say.